What we're looking at in this video is something called data types, and data types are the type of data we're going to be storing in a variable or a constant. And we're just going to look at data types related to JavaScript for now. We'll look at some others later. And so the data types which you have available in JavaScript are a number, which can be any kind of number you want. So it could be an integer like 9, or it could be a floating point number like 9.728. We then have another data type called a string. And if we imagine some text like the word hello, and if we were to put each of these letters onto card, each of these letters individually is called one character. And then to connect them all together, we would have to put them onto a piece of string. And so that's where we get the word string from. As I said, each of these is called a character, and in some languages you'll have a character data type. You don't have a character data type in JavaScript, you just have a string which only has one letter on it. And then you have a third data type in JavaScript which is called a Boolean. And in computing we have, or in programming, we have a lot of situations where we want to say that something is true or false, or we want to say that something is yes or no, or it's 0 or 1, or it's on and off. And so we do that with a Boolean, and the way that that's represented in JavaScript is with a true or a false. And most languages will use true and false to represent Booleans. Now the question comes, why do we use data types? What's the bonus of saying what data type we have? Well, first of all, it's to do with storage space. So if you think about RAM, you've got 1 byte in each location in memory, or 2 bytes or 4 bytes. So each memory address will have a limit to how much it can store. And you want to say, when the program's running, how much space do you want to make available? And so that's the first thing. If you're putting a number in, you might need less space than if you're putting a string, which is going to be a varied amount of space, whereas a Boolean only needs literally 1 bit, although it may get stored as a byte. So storage space is one of the reasons that we use data types, and another reason that we use a data type is because it can tell our program, it's possible to say when we're programming to the compiler or to the interpreter what operations, the operations that are possible. And in many languages they're very strict on this. If we try and add a letter to a number, it will refuse and say that that's impossible, we can't do that. In a language like JavaScript, it can do it, but it does something rather special, which we'll have a look at now. So let's look at data types in action within JavaScript. And so here we are. Remember that our code just goes between the script here. And so I can make some variables first of all, and I'm going to make myself a Boolean, and I'm going to call that, for example, game over. So I have a game, and at the beginning of the game, that's going to be false. It's not the game over. And so I want to put this onto the screen and just see what is happening. So if I put this onto the screen, then we see that that is false. And so I've got a Boolean in there which is false. I could switch that, so I could say that the game over is now true. And if I now put game over onto the screen, then we'll see that it says true. I'm just going to put a line of code here with a break tag in, just so that we can have it on new lines. And I will do that underneath this one as well. Okay, now let's look at some other data types which I can use. I might want to store the player's name, for example, so I can say set me up a new variable which will store the player name, and that will take a string this time. And to do a string we use the inverted commas, Shift and F2, and that will store Ollie. And then I can do putting that onto the screen. So I meant to put player name there. So I've got my player name, and I'll put that on the screen. We see Ollie there, and then I'm going to put another line of code there. Let's just separate these out to make it a bit easier to read. And then I'm also going to now look at my player score, and so the data type of this, because it's a number, it's going to be stored as a number for its data type. So let's say that their score is 25, and pop that onto the screen. And there we go. So that's got everything on the screen as we expect. What we can also do in JavaScript is we can actually look to see what is the type which it's internally using for this. So in JavaScript, we don't have to tell it what type we want a variable to be. In some other languages like C or C#, you do have to say this is the type I want you to use, in Java as well. But we don't have to do that in JavaScript. But we can see internally what type it's using. If we do type of and then put some brackets around the variable, it now says over here, it says this type of game over is a Boolean. When we switched it around to save true, I would hope that it would again say that the type is a Boolean, which it does. Now, we've got some text here, and so text, we put characters together, join them together with a string. So I'm expecting here that type of is going to be a string, and there we see it's storing a string. And the final one for a player's score, that is a number, and so when I look at the type of, we should see a number here as well. And just to check that it stores all numbers that way, so if I put in 25.265, it's still really happy and it doesn't change that, and it's still a number. Now, what we can also do is we can take a look at these, and we can look what happens when we add two strings together. And there's a special word for this, it's called concatenation. So what happens if I create two strings? So I will have text1, which is hello, and I will create text2, which is and goodbye. Now, if I put one of those out first, so I will write out text1. So there we see on our screen we get hello, and now if I use the plus symbol, which is the symbol to concatenate, remember I concatenate two strings together, if I now put text2 on there, then we see hello and goodbye side by side. Then let's just get a break underneath there. Now this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a score variable, and in fact I'll use the one which I've already done, which is player score. So if we see here, I've set up a player score which is 25, and so if I put that out on the screen to begin with, okay, so there's my player score, which is 25. Now, if I add 1 to that, so I take my player score and I assign it the value which is currently in player score and add 1 to it. So what the computer will do is it will take player score, which is 25, it will add 1 to it, and that will be a proper add, not a concatenate, so it will become 26, and then it will assign the value of 26 and put it into player score. And so if now I do player score, and we'll also put another line there, and there we go. So let's have a look at what the result is. I've got 25, I added 1 to it, put it back into player score, and then put it onto the screen, and so I get 26. Now it'd be interesting to have a look at what happens if I try and add 1. So remember, 1 is a number. If I try and add 1 to text1, which is hello here, so let's say, let's call it output, and I'm going to take text1 and I'm going to try and add 1 to text1. And remember, text1 is a string. So let's have a look and see what happens when I try and write that out onto the screen. Let's just put another break in there first. Okay, so write out what the output is from this, and it's put hello with 1 next to it. Now that's interesting. Should we have added 1 to it? In some languages, if you add 1 to a character, it will change that character because every character's got a number. In this one, we've managed to just get hello and 1. So it would suggest that what it's done is concatenated the two together. It's taken text1, which said hello and a space, and then it's changed this to a concatenation even though we've got a number here. And so let's have a look and see that that is what we've done. So we can use type of to see what type of it's made output. And here it's saying to us that yes, hello space 1 is in fact a string. However, the type of 1 is a number. So what JavaScript's done for us is it said, well, you're trying to add together a string and a number. That's impossible, so what I'll do for you is I'll convert that number into a string and then I'll concatenate the two together. And in JavaScript it lets you get away with this. It lets you take different types and change them into different types. If we look here with our player score, when we were putting the player score on the screen, like down here we put the player score on the screen, we've taken a number and we've said put this number into the document, and it needs a string to do that, so it's converted it to a string for us. We can do this in JavaScript, but we can't do this in certain other languages like Java and C#, for example, because they're known as strictly typed languages. We can do this in JavaScript. So hopefully that's given you an overview of the 3 fairly simple data types which JavaScript has and what we can do with them.